So fall is officially upon us, and we have the leaves changing colors outside and falling. And one of my favorite things to do during this time of the year is to bake. I love baking. I love filling my home with the smells of whatever it is that I am baking or roasting in the oven. And this is one of those recipes that will have your home smelling delicious. So before we get started, I'm gonna go over a few of the ingredients. Well, all of the ingredients. You're gonna need some all-purpose flour, some apples, which I will talk to you about here in a second, some baking soda, baking powder, some pure vanilla extract, egg, butter that has been softened at room temperature, some whole milk buttermilk, ground cinnamon, salt, and some brown sugar. So I'm gonna clear this up a bit so that I can start on the crumb topping. So one of the things I forgot to mention is that I had started preheating my oven to 400 degrees. I also have already lined my muffin tins with 17 liners. If you don't have any liners, there's no need to go out and buy any. You can just go ahead and butter your tins really well, and that way they don't stick to the pan. What I have already started measuring out here is some packed brown sugar. I have some salt in here, my butter, and some flour, and these are the ingredients that we're going to start out with for the crumb topping. And you cannot substitute brown sugar for regular sugar with this. You really want to use the brown sugar because it has that molasses in it, and it really helps with the overall flavor of the crumb topping. So I'm going to be blending all of these together with my pastry cutter as best as I can until I don't see any more flour in the bowl. It's going to get kind of pasty like. So one of the things I really enjoy doing in the fall, well, I did before we moved away, is meeting up with my really good friend Amanda. I met her a few years back in Safford when my husband was managing a store there, and her and I just really hit it off when we first met each other. She is so cool to hang out with. We were very adventurous together down in Safford. We went up on Mount Graham and took the kids, and we'd go hiking or sledding down the mountains whenever there was snow. And she was just that friend that would just get up and pack and go with me. And so when we had ended up leaving Safford, moving away, and then when we moved back to Arizona, her and I started this tradition of every fall break going down to Apple Annie's and letting the kids go and pick some fruit, and then we'd go and do the corn maze. And the very first time that we did this, the corn maze has different levels. So you have a beginner's level, you have an intermediate level, as well as a hard level. And the first year we went, we did the beginner's level, and we got lost. We got lost in the corn maze, and I started taking the corn down and kind of doing like this little Hansel and Gretel thing, so that way if we came around to the same spot again, we would see the corn in our path and know like, you're going the wrong way again. As we kept going through, I realized, okay, there's a lot of corn on the floor. Just pick up some of the ones off of the floor, put them in the path so that you're not picking off good corn. I don't know why I didn't think about that at first. But so yeah, so we got lost, did the Hansel and Gretel thing, and we found our way through. The next year, we were willing to try the intermediate. We made it through that really fast, and then we went right away and did the advanced level and made it through that. So the first year was the challenging year, but then we got it down, and the kids really enjoyed doing it, and it was a lot of fun. I really liked going down there to Wilcox to hang out. They have some of the best fudge, and it's just a good little outing trip to take with the kids, I think. So here is the crumb topping. As you can see, it's kind of chunky, and that is the texture that you are trying to get with this. So now we are going to move on with getting the flour mixture together for the muffins. So a good little tip when you're measuring out your flour is you want to kind of give it a nice little fluff, and that way when you're measuring it and leveling it, it's not compacted into the measuring cup. It can end up making your muffins a lot more dense at the end. So let me move the flour out the way. So to the flour for the muffin batter, we are going to be adding in some salt, some baking soda, baking powder, and some more cinnamon. I am going to whisk these together and set them aside. So what I am doing now is peeling my apples. The kind of apples you use for this recipe, it really doesn't matter. I use whatever I have on hand. I like using Granny Smith because they add a bit of tartness to kind of help balance all the sweetness that's in the muffins. But really any apple you have on hand would work. Today I'm going to be using a Honeycrisp as well as a Granny Smith. I do like to use the Gala apples as well. Those work really well in this, but pretty much any apple you have on hand can work. Okay, so now I am going to cut around the apple, cut around the core, and I'm going to show you how I cut these. I take each slice and I cut it in half. Then I cut really small rectangular strips. And then I keep it lined up until I go through and cut them into really small little pea-sized like squares. I think this size works great for these muffins because then you have more than just one in each bite. And I tend to like it that way better. But if you want them a little chunkier, you can go ahead and make them chunkier. Okay, I am finally done dicing my apple. And what I like to do, since I am using two different kind of apples, I give it a little bit of a toss. That way I'm getting a little of both. Try not to make too big of a mess. Now for the rest of this batter, to get this batter going, we've already measured out our dry ingredients and have those sitting aside. You're gonna need some brown sugar and an egg to start it out with. I like to crack my egg separately, just in case an eggshell gets in, but not only that, if your egg is bad, then you do not wanna mess up the other ingredients that you're gonna be adding it to. So we're gonna give this a whisk. Normally, whenever I am making cakes or any kind of dessert, a lot of times it starts out with the sugar and the butter creaming together. But since I am using more sugar than butter, it's a little harder to get it incorporated. And then I add in the room temperature butter, and here's where it is important for the butter to be room temperature in order to get it to incorporate into the egg mixture well, or I should say evenly. As you can see, it is starting to mix in just right. So it is nice and creamed together. I've been whisking for about a minute. Doesn't take much time to get that together. Going to add in some vanilla. Okay, so as you can see, I've moved on from my whisk and I am now using a spatula because once I start alternating between the flour and the buttermilk mixture, I don't want to activate the glutens and cause my muffin to be a little bit more dense. So we are going to use the spatula to kind of fold the ingredients together instead of whisking them together. So we're going to start out with about 1/3 of the flour mixture. Just going to fold it in, not fully incorporating it at this time. Okay, so I've added in half of the buttermilk. Now I'm adding in another 1/3 of the flour mixture. You want to start with the flour and end with the flour. And I'm just going to keep folding. The buttermilk that I am using is actually a homemade buttermilk. You do not need to go out and buy buttermilk from the store if you don't have any already on hand. If you have some vinegar and some milk, that'll do the trick. So as you can see here, my buttermilk is actually nice and thick. The way that I do mine is I add 5 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar to the measuring cup. Then I fill it up with whole milk up to the 1 line measurer. And I give it a stir, set it aside, and then it's ready for me. So that is a good little trick that you can do if you don't have any on hand. And you can use regular vinegar if you'd like. I like apple cider, so I tend to use that more. Let's go ahead and finish adding in the rest of these ingredients so we can move on to the next step. Before it gets fully incorporated, I am going to now add in my apples, which I'm gonna measure. And it's important to measure them because a lot of times when I first started making these muffins, I would just add in 2 apples. And I noticed occasionally that the texture of the apples would be too moist, and I think it's because I just would add the whole apple, not wanting to waste any. And so measuring it out will actually help make sure that it's the same texture every single time that you bake it. And if you have some left over, you can do like I do and give it to one of the kids, or you can snack on it. You don't need to throw it out, have it go to waste. So just get this measured so that I can now start folding it into the batter as well. So as you can see, this batter came together very nicely. I am going to now start filling my muffin tins with a heaping scoop of batter into each one. This kind of helps ensure that all of them come out around the same size so that they bake more evenly. Is very important. So now that I got all of these filled, we're gonna move on with topping these with the crumb topping. As you can see, it's nice and chunky, which we want it to stay this way. You don't want to break it up too much. So I'm going to take about 1/2 tablespoon, add it to the top of each of these. Kind of give it a little press. It's going to help it stick to the batter. Okay, so I'm just sprinkling on some of the extra crumb topping I had left over. I'm going to pop these into the oven for around 12 minutes. It may take a little longer, a little less, depending on your oven. One way you can tell if they're done is by getting a toothpick and inserting it right into the center of the muffin. And if it comes out clean, then you know it's ready. But I would say check it. Right around 12 minutes, it should be done. Okay, so as you can see, my muffins have came out of the oven. I moved them onto this cooling rack so that they can finish cooling. I'm going to give one a try. The house smells so good. You can smell the cinnamon. You can even smell a bit of the apples coming through from the muffin. They are so delicious. Nice buttery flavor. You get some of that molasses from the brown sugar and the crumb topping. And you can see here how moist it is, all the bits of apple running all throughout the muffin, which is why I think it is very important to cut them into small cubes, because then you get a good bite of them in each and every bite that you take. You have got to give this recipe a try. You can find the written recipe over on my blog at www.myinspiredaccounts.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you again. Think I catch one with my mouth?